The show is about to start, folks, but the refreshment stand will remain open for your pleasure.
The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
We'll see you tomorrow. What awaits me. I heard it's pretty ugly.
We got some news. I have one piece that I'd like to throw out there.
Okay, all right.
Too.
Let's talk. As long as we keep
Should
it positive.
Get into it?
Yeah, let's go.
We're still here.
All three of us are here.
All three of us.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
We're surviving. Hunker down.
And we're ushering you through this crisis as well as each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I got your back, just 6 feet away.
Thank you, Jeff.
We're not doing any trust falls because I ain't catching you. There's no corporate retreat for this one.
Now, if we all did a trust fall, like in our individual spaces, I think we'd be knocking down quite a bit of furniture. So there's not a lot of room behind
Not only that, we'd have about 2 hours of dead air as we all pass out.
As well. It'd be like 1917, real time. And you'd have to listen throughout the entire 2 hours to get to the content.
Who's gonna wake up first?
So this week, if you've been listening, you will know what we're covering. We are determined to not let this current crisis that we find ourselves in shake us. We are still covering Mulan.
How, you may ask?
How?
What?
It's a little bit of a cheat. You could call
it
that.
Cheat.
But we're covering the 1998 animated version of Disney's Mulan, and unfortunately not the live action, which I am so ready to see now after.
That's right, because you never saw Mulan, correct?
I know, I never have. I kind of.
You had never seen Mulan, really?
No. I've kind of turned my back on Disney in the late 90s. And, speaking of very successful podcasts, I looked at our numbers this morning. We had 113 listens in Australia alone, but
yes.
But
in
to
one
be
day?
fair, I think it was the same person just listening to every single episode.
Every episode.
And that's fine as well.
Thank you.
A listen is a listen.
A listen is a listen is a
Somebody
listen.
who got a bookmark from me. Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
somebody who maybe is finally looking at that bookmark as they're reading your book. Hey,
What is this? What is this crap? Let me look it up. You turn it on. It's like, Christina's not in this one. Click.
so thank you, whoever that is in Australia.
Yes. Keep listening. Spread the word. We'll send you some stickers.
So what do we got news-wise, Jeff?
Oh, we have nothing but good news. We're gonna stay positive, and our number one news this week is the fact that we have in-house an international bestseller. Oh! So you guys ambushed me last week, so I'm gonna ambush you. Yes, Christina hit the big time.
Yeah, so Alice just was finally released in Germany, and the first week out, it hit number 15 on the Der Spiegel bestseller list, which is sort of like their New York Times bestseller
It's such
list.
a
So it's
lovely,
like a big
harsh
deal.
language. in German. Der Spiegel.
So I'm an international. You may refer to me as international bestselling author.
So we can
Nice.
update all of our promotional materials now.
We're gonna have to update your graphic now.
Maybe holding a world map or a globe in one
I'm
hand.
gonna put a big tiara around her head.
No, it was really cool. It was
That's
like,
awesome, though.
like a
That's-
cool thing to find out with everything else going on. So
Yeah. Yeah, so people see in this time, people are turning to books. My bookstore or the library only let me keep it for a week.
Jeff, I'll just send you a copy. Okay, you can keep it.
Would you sign it?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. Yes.
Why did you just say something?
I don't know because no. Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
You know, we are nerds, but we didn't want to be that much of a
We
nerd
are,
to ask
right,
you to
exactly.
sign a book for us.
Yeah. You know how you kept your distance, Lazenby? You didn't tell him about the podcast? I would love that. Thank you.
Yes, I'll send you a
Because
copy.
we've always been under the impression, hey, we know her. We don't need an autograph.
No, I like the autograph stuff. In that regard, I do like stuff like that. So there you go. That's our in-house good news. On the outside world, we have a couple other things in development, which is weird that things are still being announced on Hollywood Reporter. I guess all of Hollywood's not completely closed down. But Ryan Reynolds is set to star and executive produce a movie based on Dragon's Lair, the video game, the impossible video game.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I lost your audio for a second. I thought you said Dragon Slayer.
No, that would have been awesome.
It's Dragon's Lair, right?
Dragon's Lair with
Okay.
what was the character's name? Was it Lance? That was a
I
little too
don't
on the
remember.
nose, but it might be. But this was like the most impossible video game ever because I think it was animated by Don Bluth, and it was just, you know what I'm talking about, right, Jim?
Oh yeah,
The video game. And it was, this thing just sucked quarters out of you.
and it
Because
did.
you
And
just died.
you had
You just-
even then. I got very impatient with this game because you had to wait, for each little section to kind of reset
Render,
itself.
right? Yeah.
And if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, this was the first, as far as I know, video game in an arcade that was animated.
Right, correct.
Was fully animated.
Yeah. It wasn't little bits and blocks.
Pixels and things like that.
This was full on movie. So I find that interesting. We'll see where it goes. I don't know. I hated the video game. I mean, it was gorgeous to look at, but it was just because it was impossible to play. So
And
I don't
it
even
was
know
a
what
novelty.
the story was because you never got past the first 2 minutes, and you would just turn to bones. Josh Gad and Luke Evans, who played in the live action Beauty and the Beast, they were Gaston and Lafleur.
Lafleur.
LeFou. Mhm.
Bless you. They're doing a limited prequel series of these characters for Disney Plus. Does anybody care?
Well, they were both quite good in the live
Yeah.
action.
Oh, I
Beauty and the
agree
Beast.
with you, but we know Gaston's a jerk. How can he? Can he run a whole show? Do you care enough about him? You know he dies in the Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, I mean,
I would watch that. I think.
I think Josh Gad is really funny. So.
Yes, I agree with you on that. If he shows up in an Olaf costume, that'd be awesome. Okay, so that's my other news. Taika Waititi, because we can't go 1 week without talking about him, is set to write, direct, and executive produce not one, but 2 original animated series based on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this.
But 2?
Wow.
Like, why do we need 2?
Well, first of
Are
all,
we
there's
gonna
2
follow-
books. I don't know if you are aware of
Okay.
that. Yeah.
But okay, I guess I got the impression that maybe it was going to like follow the children beforehand. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, that would probably still be good, though. I mean,
yeah.
In the hands of Taika Waititi.
So when
I
you
would
say
like to
2
see-
series, could that be construed as 2 seasons, or is it 2 separate?
No,
series?
two different series. So that's what I took for Netflix, by the way.
Okay.
So I don't know how far in development that is, but that's cool. I mean, if he's going to write and direct, I don't know what animation studio they would pick up, but we shall see on that one. And the only other news I have, and this is good news coming out of all this crap, is the fact that the Golden Globes have changed their rules. So now a movie that is chosen no longer has to be shown in a theater in order to be eligible, which makes perfect sense
Interesting.
because theaters are not existent right now.
I thought that was already in effect. Didn't they nominate The Irishman in a number of categories?
there was a limited,
limited
release for
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Probably in Chicago only, by the way.
Yeah, I did play here.
So you like to think that maybe the Academy would follow suit?
Yeah, I don't
They
know.
have to.
The Academy,
right?
I mean, I think they would have to change the rules maybe for this year, but I don't know if they would make it a permanent change because the Academy is still really invested in the theater experience. Yeah, I don't know if they would change it permanently, but I would think that you'd have to adjust the rules for this year because there are a lot of films that are going straight to streaming.
Right. So
Mhm.
you have amusing news. Oh, I like
Amusing
that.
news.
Okay, amusing.
I don't know
Amuse
if
us.
either of you saw this. It was on somebody's Twitter feed, and they posted this video of Jared Leto. Now, we did mention him last week, coming back from a meditation retreat and not knowing anything about this virus, and it very much bummed him out. But this takes the cake.
Oh, no.
Now, you know how some celebrities host cruise ship parties where it's like, whether it's like 80s music and there's a bunch of bands that play in a cruise ship and they kind of host the whole journey? Well, apparently Jared Leto has an island that his band invites fans to, and it's called Mars Island because his band is 30 Seconds to Mars.
And then they hunt them?
No,
No.
this is the thing.
Oh,
He walks around in white flowing robes, long beard, long hair, with his arms extended, and it looks, for all intents and purposes, like a cult. Yeah.
So we really should have covered this last week when we were talking about Jeremiah Sand, right?
Right. I didn't see this until a couple of days ago. The person that posted this kind of was writing about it with bemusement. And so, and in that same way, am I reporting it to you? Because there's a few, intimate acoustic performances by 30 Seconds to Mars. But all these people also dressed in white robes, like looking at him adoringly. And the still photos were just him addressing the crowds with arms extended.
That was Creed, arms wide
his
open.
own flowing white robes. It did look kind of cultish.
Free Kool-Aid over here, kids. Free Kool-Aid.
I don't want to denigrate anybody. I don't want to turn this negative, but yeah, it just seems odd.
Was this like current? Like this wasn't like last year's retreat. This was like happened after he came back from a sabbatical.
No.
in the desert?
I don't think that it was. And
he went on with it. He's
that would
like,
be more
"Screw
like
this."
outrageous news than anything else.
Right. You know, it's funny you mentioned him because I just saw the official trailer for Morbius dropped.
Really?
And it looks the
footage,
looks
or
pretty-
is it just
no,
like
no,
a
it's
teaser?
no. We saw the teaser before. What was that in front of? Was that in Harley Quinn? No, because that was
Yeah, I didn't get that in front of Harley Quinn.
Me neither.
Unfortunately.
No, maybe it wasn't because that is Warner Brothers. And this is Sony. But the poster is pretty cool. It looks, again, it's a big head of Jared Leto. So I don't know. The more I see of this, the more I'm a little more, I'm intrigued. So.
Well, that was
hopefully
always
it'll-
one of my favorite Spider-Man characters.
Yeah.
Regardless who's playing it, I'm going to be excited to see it.
Okay.
But hopefully Spider-Man is actually in it.
Even in the trailer, there's a scene where he walks down an alleyway and there's a painting of Spider-Man with the word murderer spray painted across the front of it. So they're feeding right off of what happens at the end of Far From Home.
Far From Home.
Not to be confused with Farfignugan. And on that note.
It's too bad that I don't have an eye-rolling sound effect yet. So I'm
Not
still
yet?
searching for that perfect one, because that was a dad joke if there ever was. All right, should we get into this? Mulan?
Let's go. Are we doing Mulan first or are we doing
Let's
Detective
do Mulan
Dee?
first, since that would have been what we would have done first if we saw the live action.
all
So
right.
let's do Mulan first.
Let's do Mulan first.
1998. This was released in the middle of the Disney Renaissance, as it's referred to. I don't know really when it officially started. Could it have been Little Mermaid, Great Mouse
Little Mermaid.
Detective?
Little Mermaid. I think Great Mouse Detective, I think, falls on the other end of that. I would say Little Mermaid.
Into the Black Cauldron.
Would you get into
series
the
of
Alan
films.
Menken's Lion King?
In the middle of the Disney Renaissance was released Mulan in 1998. In June of that year, it came out, based on the Chinese legend of Mulan. Takes place in the Han Dynasty era. Depicts Fa Mulan, daughter of Fa Zhou. And the story goes, as we all know, that the Huns are invading and the Han Dynasty is conscripting. Not only do they need their army, but they're bringing in everybody from the villages. In every family, one male should be fighting for the dynasty against the Huns. Unfortunately, Fa Zhou is older and he's been injured from his youth in previous wars and fighting.
And he has no son.
His daughter, Mulan, tries to intervene when the government comes through town and handing out their orders for every family. Brings to him dishonor when she tries to reason with them, saying that her father can't go. So that night, she decides, while they're sleeping, to go in his stead. And that is basically the setup and story of Mulan, where she fights as a male in a male army, trying to assimilate and not be found out as the Huns are approaching. And now, in great Disney tradition, it's got some talking animals. Well, not some, but one, which we have Mushu, played by Eddie Murphy, who is her kind of guardian angel dragon. Very much in the vein of Robin Williams as the genie in Aladdin. I think they were probably trying to
Outdo each
lightning
other.
strike twice here. Watching this, and this is the first time that I've watched this movie. It is gorgeous. I
Yeah,
saw.
it is very impressive. Yeah.
I managed to get the Blu-ray, and it's probably cleaned up and nice looking on Disney Plus as well. But the animation in this is just top tier.
Mhm.
I've rarely seen 2D animation that looks this good. It just really whet my appetite. I love the story, and I love the character arc, and I loved how they handled the gender roles here.
Mhm.
And I can't wait after seeing this to see the live action. I wasn't really
Yeah.
that excited because I didn't have a history with this
Right.
movie
Oh,
beforehand.
yeah.
So after seeing this, my hopes are so high, and maybe that's a bad thing for the live action. But from what I understand, they're not doing the kind of cutesy route that Disney took with the
No, I think
animated
they're adhering more toward the Ballad of Mulan.
poem. Yeah.
Right, because the Disney version's actually technically based on a story by Robert Sansucci. It's like a kid's story, and obviously the Ballad of Mulan goes back to, it was originally written in the 6th century, based supposedly on a historical figure who may have been real between the 3rd and the 5th centuries. But the story has been told and retold so many times in Chinese history. Like most famously, there's a play from the 18th century, which is really like sort of the contemporary source material for this story. But there's many, many, many versions of the story. Mulan is a story that's told over and over and over again.
And of course, we have Just One of the Guys here in America, which is
Yeah.
another version, a variation of the story.
Not exactly the same.
Just one of the guys.
Yeah, I saw this actually. There was a theater in Albany, New York, and then I've forgotten now the name of it, but it was a theater where they also did like live shows. Like I remember seeing an opera there, and they also showed films sometimes. And I saw Mulan there when it came out in 1998. I sat in the balcony, and it's a very, very beautiful film, like animation wise. Like you have the beautiful kind of calligraphy opening, like the backgrounds are gorgeous. There's always like, these beautiful bamboo forests, or like just sort of like these blue mountains behind. The animation is really, really beautiful, and such a fantastic voice cast, like one of my favorite voice casts from any animated film.
Eddie Murphy aside.
Well, I mean, Eddie Murphy is really good at what Eddie Murphy does.
Yes, I love the character. I do.
Like Ming-Na Wen as Mulan, which, she's perfect. B.D. Wong as Li Shang.
Yep.
Miguel Ferrer as Shan Yu. He has that wonderful, intimidating voice.
One of the darkest villains in Disney history, I think, as well.
And it's cool because he's not like a supernatural bad guy. He doesn't have superpowers or anything. He's a real flesh and blood badass.
Although he does have the fangs and the claws.
Yeah.
So they give him some accessories to beat him up a little bit.
It's a little stylized, but that scene when they run into the 2 members of the Chinese army, and then he says, go tell the emperor that we're here, and then he says to his toady, how many men do you need to deliver a message? And he says 1.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's really, really dark, I think, for a so-called kids movie. And one of the big things is that Mulan, even though they try to play it for laughs, like her life is actually in danger because of what she's doing here.
Right.
Oh yeah,
Or her
you
whole
really
family's
get
lives
that.
are in danger because she's dishonoring them. By
The urgency of her not being discovered is with her throughout this movie.
Right. The stakes are literally death. If she's discovered, she will be killed. And it's such an interesting thing because in stories where boys are heroes, there's always this sense of, boys are just fulfilling their destiny. Boys are always told, you can do this. But stories where girls are the heroines, the stakes are always so much higher. Girls are always told, you can't. You're not supposed to. This isn't for you. And it's true, like not just in Mulan, but even in other contemporary Disney stories like Merida and Brave, right? Moana, even Judy Hobson's Zootopia. They're always told, you can't. This isn't for you. So they're trying to not just do something to be heroic, they're also like define cultural norms and cultural expectations to try to become something that society won't allow them to be.
I agree with you in the sense that, this is like one of the first Disney characters, female, that's not like pining for a prince or someplace better. She's doing this out of honor for her family. And if she's got to step into this role and take her father's place, then so be it.
Yeah. And if anything, the role is reversed where the prince, quote unquote, is pining for her because he comes
Right.
pursuing her at the end.
One of the things I like about this film, so there's two songs, right? Be a Man and A Girl Worth Fighting For. And they're both great songs, like just sort of unto themselves. But Be a Man in a lot of ways is like this sort of condemnation of what it takes to be an ideal man, right? It lists off all these traits that are sort of like typically masculine and the way that you're supposed to be. And there's this idea that that there's only one way to be a man, and that if you don't fulfill these things, then you aren't. And Li Shang, as a character, is sort of trapped in this straight line where there's only one way for him to be a man, right? He has to be strong, and he has to repress his emotions, and he sort of even thinks in a straight line. And then you flip that with A Girl Worth Fighting For, which is this exact counterpoint where they list off all these kind of feminine ideals, right? A girl who's beautiful and who can cook and who will stare at me adoringly and, who will think that I'm wonderful. And because Mulan is between worlds, she's the only one who can think flexibly. So she's the only one who can see outside of these ideals, see outside of these cultural norms. And in the scene where the Huns are coming down the mountain, Li Shang's like, okay, let's all line up and valiantly sacrifice ourselves.
Yeah.
And she's
Old
like,
school,
no, that's dumb. Let's do something else here.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a phenomenal scene, by the way.
And going back to the scene where, in the beginning, where she is going to see the matchmaker.
Yeah.
And there's that big number where they make up her face and they put up her hair, and grandmother and her mother are bringing in there. I just we were talking about the stellar voice cast before.
Yes.
I knew
that grandmother.
Yes.
Voiced by June Foray. I heard her voice, so I looked it up. I'm like, oh, that's her.
She's Granny from Tweety Bird. She's what do you call it? Bullwinkle and Rocky. She's friggin' Rocky the Flying Squirrel.
But as soon as I saw who that was, I couldn't stop singing.
Yeah.
A cup of tea, a cookie, and you.
She was also Cindy Lou Who and Karen from Frosty the Snowman.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I saw that. That is a great number and a great setup for who the character of Mulan is, what she's rallying against even before she gets into this whole gender switching role.
Yeah, her dad says that really heartbreaking thing at the beginning when he says, I know my place, it's time you learned yours.
Ouch.
And it's so hard, for her to hear that, because she knows she's supposed to be this puzzle piece that slots in, and she can't make herself do that. And that, again, going back to A Girl Worth Fighting For, when all the guys look to her and say, who's your ideal girl? And she's like, how about a girl who's got a brain?
Right.
No.
Yeah, no, that's not it.
And then when she takes up the mantle and she grabs her father's armor and she goes out the door and she knows what she has to do, even her ancestors think it's a bad idea, the ghosts that are in the tower. So that's how Mushu comes into it, because they want to get her back before she's discovered and before she brings dishonor on the family. And of course, they choose the biggest, scariest dragon to do that, and then Mushu somehow kills him, crumbles him, and then goes himself. But
pocket-sized.
And getting back to Shan Yu, played by Miguel Ferrer, the menace of this character is kind of pervading, and you need that in a Disney bad guy because the stakes are very high. And that one scene, not only where he, as we mentioned before, the scene where he asks how many people does it take to brand. I thought they were getting into how many people does it take to screw in a light bulb, some joke, but no.
He went one further on that one.
The scene where he picks up the little doll that the hawk drops off to him is really scary. But what's funny is that leading up to that, when the hawk drops it off, it's like, did the hawk just poop and he caught it? And
it's a baby doll.
He's really fast. He's got great reflexes. And the fact that they see the doll after they get to the town and it's razed, it's been burned by the Huns. Just that line that he gives where he's like, well, I think this little girl is missing this doll. And obviously they did something terrible to her and everybody else in the town. Very dark, and one of the best villains, I think, ever in the Disney.
Definitely.
Interesting. We didn't talk about Donny Osmond yet.
Donny Osmond sings Be a Man because V.D. Wong does not sing, and Lea Salonga sings for Ming Na Wen for Mulan's parts.
Now, shouldn't be a surprise to anybody because this is done quite a bit in animated films. Like, I think
Right.
the best example is Nightmare Before Christmas, where Chris Sarandon does the speaking voices of Jack,
But
and then
it's,
Danny Elfman does
Danny
the singing
Elfman.
voices, and flawlessly. I wouldn't know if I didn't read that there were two different voices.
For as a voice cast, I love Harvey Fierstein, who plays Yahoo.
He likes dressing in drag, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Even in
well,
animated form, he dresses in drag.
right. So if people don't know, he is the playwright of Torch Song Trilogy.
And you can't
Very
mistake
gravelly
his voice.
voiced
You cannot
playwright.
mistake his voice at
Yeah,
all.
as soon as he speaks, you know who that is.
Yeah.
I'm Harvey.
There's so many scenes with him and the rest of the soldiers, how they interact with Mulan as Ping. One line that she has that I just thought was funny was extremely suggestive as well. I see you have a sword. I have one too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always there's a lot of layers to things that she says just because
You're in on the secret. You know that she's a girl, right?
Yeah.
because of the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Gere Watanabe plays Ling. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He was in 16 Candles.
Oh, yes.
Really? Yeah.
Yes.
And
I didn't put
also
that two together,
in Gung Ho, if you remember that movie, the Michael Keaton movie.
though. I haven't seen it. The car industry
Yeah.
one.
So, Christina, do you know the story behind why Jackie Chan voices Li Shang in China, in the Chinese version of this movie?
I don't know the story, but I'm assuming it's because Jackie Chan is a huge star in China. Is it because?
Well, I don't know. I'm asking you. So
Yeah, no.
we're
I
really
just read
asking
that
you.
he voiced it
Yeah,
for the
I don't-
international versions. But
That's
obviously not in the
interesting.
American version.
Why they wouldn't have just chosen him to begin with?
Right.
Yeah, I don't
Interesting
know.
aside for
Yeah.
Mulan.
I'm
I mean,
assuming
you got a couple other
it's
big
he's a
names
huge-
in there.
Yeah, James Hong, who plays Chifu. He's Lo Pan in Big Trouble in Little China.
That's another one we got to get to.
Yes.
And he's also Mr. Ping in Kung Fu Panda. If you love Kung Fu Panda as much as
So
I do.
no, as soon as you hear his voice, I
Yeah.
can't help but think of Big Trouble in Little China. Like him in the full sorcerer's getup. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Soon Taek Oh, who plays is a Korean American actor who plays Mulan's father. I love his voice. I just think he has such a beautiful kind of almost soothing tone to his voice.
Right.
He did a lot of American television, like one of those character actors who was kind of like a guest star on every show.
Mhm.
He actually just passed away fairly recently, maybe 2 years ago. He had Alzheimer's, but I love him too. Fun fact, I don't know if you guys are aware, especially with the flower symbology between Mulan and her
Lotus.
father. Mulan actually means magnolia. Hua, which is her name is Hua Mulan. The Cantonese spelling is Fa, which is what they use in the film. It means flower. So her name literally means magnolia flower.
Who knew? I didn't know that.
We were talking earlier, well, I was, about the like masculine and feminine ideals and the gender roles and the way, Li Shang especially sort of like keeps thinking in this straight line. Even at the end when the Huns show up and kidnap the emperor, he's trying to batter the door down, like he still has this real like kind of like strength will overcome straight line thinking. He's trying to punch his way out of the problem. And then Mulan shows up and says, hey, I have this crazy idea. And of course, all of her friends immediately drop what they're doing and go with her because they've learned to trust her and like this sort of sideways thinking that she has. But I love it because it's the three of them dressed in drag, and it's such a wonderful subversion of what Mulan's been doing for the whole movie.
Right. Yeah. We haven't really talked about the epic battle that is waged on the snowy mountains where Mulan finally causes the avalanche, where she just realizes that rather than taking out Shan Yu, hitting the mountain and taking them all out would be the way to go. The scene with the Huns coming over the mountain, like driving down the snow, is almost like a precursor to the Helm's Deep scene in the Lord of the Rings. It's so epic. And I watched this with my full surround sound system going. And that scene is just
Rumbling.
the edge of your seat kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And then, of
Also
course,
reminds
the
me a lot of
avalanche
the
comes down and buries everybody.
Wildebeest Stampede in Lion King.
Yeah, very similar to that as well.
Yeah. I think it's the same software that they developed.
And when they do kidnap the emperor, Shan Yu is on the nearby rooftop, and the rest of his surviving men are in that dragon.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering if anybody was surprised by that, seeing that for the first time. Like, you always get that person, like, you could to any of us, like, that's telegraphed. Oh, they're in the
Right, yeah, yeah,
dragon.
yeah.
They keep
Mhm.
showing the dragon's
Right,
giant
right.
head right
Oh,
there.
we know where they are.
But I can picture that one person in the theater in 1998, like when they burst out, oh, they were in the dragon the whole time.
Didn't see that coming.
This is a movie that, like, as soon as it came out, on DVD or video at the time, I guess, maybe. I bought it. I've watched it so many times. I think men maybe aren't as aware, like, how meaningful it is to see yourself as a hero on screen. Even though I was not young when this movie came out, it meant a lot to me to see a female hero, to see a woman who was sort of defying norms, defying stereotypes, and who was powerful not because she learned how to do things the way a guy does, but because she, used her own self, her own uniqueness. Yeah, this is a movie that's actually meant a lot to me for a long time. So I'm really glad that we're covering it.
Cool. Even though it was just the animated version and not the live action.
Yeah, I mean,
I
but
think the
too.
live action is going to have a lot of gravitas to it.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm really excited. And I know for sure there's some well-known Chinese superstars in the live-action version. Donnie Yen, for one. I'm super excited to see him.
Who is he playing?
It looks like, I didn't look at the cast list, but it looks like based on the preview that he would play the Li Shang.
Okay.
He's the head of the army.
Right.
I don't know if he's still going to be Li Shang or if they're going to rename him or what. But yeah, I was pretty excited to see him in the preview. In fact, if you guys have Disney Plus, that show Disney Insider has a little clip on the live action Mulan this week.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
It's like 8 minutes long, maybe, little behind the scenes
like
thing, but yeah.
So, Jeff, what about you? Do you have is there any standout memory for you?
No, because this was pre-children. I know for a fact I did not see it in the theater. I probably picked it up on VHS when I was amassing my Disney library, and I did collect Disney movies. There's a reason I married my wife, who also was really big into Disney. She had Ariel bed sheets when I met her, so it was like, all right, we'll get along good. So, but it is probably one of the first movies that I showed my daughter to, as far as female empowerment and just characters that aren't waiting for the damsel in distress, waiting to be saved, kind of a thing. So
now, talking about a strong female character, a strong female hero, another Disney film I've never seen. I'm just curious because I know you both probably have seen it. How does this compare to Pocahontas in terms of female empowerment?
I like this much better than Pocahontas. I think Pocahontas is very watered down, if you want to say that. I mean, she's a strong female character, but again, she's still tied directly to John Smith.
Yeah, her arc is still overall more of a romantic arc, which is not necessarily. I don't want to dismiss romance because, like, that's still, that's still a valid way to have an arc. I think that Mulan is a better character. And Mulan also has kind of a romantic arc with Li Shang, which I love at the end when I really think he's at his best when he's unsure of himself. Yeah.
Buddy there's got to tell him, well, a woman like this doesn't come around once in a century.
And he's like, you fight good. He doesn't know what else to say.
He doesn't know what to say, right? Because he's completely been surrounded by men his whole life, and he's been taught to be a man's man. So
right, exactly. So, like, he becomes much more interesting, I think, at the end when he's suddenly unsure of himself and sort of unsure of his place, and he sees her father, and he thinks, I'm gonna make some proposal to her dad, and he feels like he's on his steady ground, right? He's like, Honorable Fa Zhu, and he starts giving this little speech, and then Mulan appears from behind her dad, and he's like, oh, you forgot your helmet.
I came all this way just to give you this. Have a good day.
A couple of interesting behind the scenes things. The cricket character named Cricky
Mm-hmm.
was put in at the insistence of both story artist Joe Grant and Michael Eisner himself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they thought that the story needed another comedic animal character, but the director and everybody directly involved in the making of this did not want that cricket. So it got to the point where they'd have story meetings with Eisner, and Grant would be there, and Eisner would be saying stuff like, yeah, that's all well and good, but where's the cricket in all of this? Where's the cricket?
Where's the cricket?
And that Joe
want the
Grant,
cricket.
and he designed the character of the cricket. So he would slip pictures that he'd made of the cricket under the director's door while they were having their
Nice.
own meetings.
That's funny because the whole scene with the matchmaker, the reason why things go so wrong for Mulan is because the cricket
Right.
like ruins everything. Basically, she's trying to hide the cricket from the matchmaker.
Right.
So it seems like the cricket was pretty well integrated.
Integral, right,
Well, that's
yeah,
probably
by then.
because of those meetings with Eisner. That's very
Right.
good, but where's the cricket? He has got to be in the scene doing stuff. Okay. We'll make this revolve around the cricket then to make him happy.
And Frank Welker, I believe, did the voice of the cricket, which is just a bunch of chirping noises, but he is Scooby-Doo.
Yes, and I
himself.
think he does the horse.
And Freddy, he
noises
does Freddy as well.
Yeah, another little interesting aside, because of the recent disappointments of both The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Hercules, they
I
cut back.
loved Hercules.
But box office wise, I'm saying
Yeah,
disappointments. They cut back the marketing on Mulan. They cut it in half, actually.
Wow.
To cut costs,
To
but it
try
was
and
a
save.
success. It cost $90 million to make, and then worldwide it made $304 million. So box office success.
Okay. I was curious how it was received overseas, since it is based on not an American tale.
Of that total of $304 million, I think most of it was overseas.
Well, leading into this live action Mulan, there was a lot riding on the China market. So
they're really dependent on the
and
Chinese
that was one of the first movies that they pulled and said, you know what, we're not releasing this because it's just not going to find an audience. Obviously, China was on half lockdown at the time. So,
and of course, at the time, like any Disney movie worth its salt, it had a Happy Meal at McDonald's. And for the promotion, McDonald's actually, for the chicken nuggets Happy Meal,
I remember this.
You remember
it was
this?
Totally offensive, and it was unbelievably offensive, especially compared to how sensitive Disney had been producing the film. You know, how sensitive they'd been to cultural things. They said it's Chinamite, right? Yeah.
No, I was going with the sauce that they put in.
The Szechuan sauce.
The Szechuan
that
sauce.
people demanded they return, and they actually brought it back. They really did. But that's marketing. That's a marketing.
But it's so offensive, like, and especially when it's compared to the Disney's treatment of the material and the culture, and you know.
See, I didn't even know that. I was just going with the sauce. That's
sauce.
Unbelievable that they named it.
I remember the marketing campaign, and I was just at the time. It's so offensive. It stuck with me 22 years later.
Wow. You think somewhere along the line someone would have been like, you know, maybe this is not a good idea.
Mulan was actually protested in Turkey, not due to any gender roles reversals or anything like that, because they took offense to the portrayal of the Huns. So some groups tried to get it banned in Turkey during its initial release. So there you have it, Mulan. And we cannot wait now until the live action. So how many buckets would we give Mulan? It's kind of unfair to ask us to give Disney films buckets, because I think there's just being Disney films, you're already locked into 3 buckets before you've even seen this thing.
Unless it's the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I got nothing. Wow, Crickets. Well, since this is the first time you've seen it, I'm curious to see what your takeaway is.
I'm going to go 3.5. Enjoyed it. Thought it was great. Even though we go 5 buckets, 3 is not a bad score at all. I enjoyed it, and I'm taking it up a notch for 3.5. So I really liked it.
Yeah, for me, it's a 4. I mean, just because I've owned this movie basically since it came out on video. Right. And I've watched it so many times.
It is a rewatchable. It is definitely a rewatchable movie. It is one of them. I would go right in between then. I'll split the difference.
3 3/4?
3 3/3. Yeah. So it is a solid movie. And like you said, the voice casting is pretty spot on, you know, and Eddie Murphy's at the top of his game, really. I mean, I do enjoy the character. So there you go.
It'll be interesting to see how they reference Mushu. If at all.
If at all. I don't,
They've got to have a throwaway, maybe, like, you know, of a statue
she's
or
eating
something.
Mushu pork or something at one point. And really? Ooh, this is good. I will say that the other night, this was only like a week or so ago, I'm flipping channels, and PBS had a One Night Only with Donny Osmond. And I will tell you, this man does not age. but when he comes to this song, they pulled on the big video projector and they show the whole training sequence while he sings the song. Oh. And there's guys out on stage marching around. It didn't look like there was a single man in the audience, though. Now, if Marie had showed up.
So with that, let's go to the concession stand. Now, I am not going to play the McDonald's Happy Meal
No,
commercial, so everybody
we
can
set it
calm
up.
down. I am
want
not
my
that
Szechuan
insensitive.
sauce.
I am not that insensitive. So we're going to go to the concession stand, and we're going to come right back.
Popcorn hungry, we have it. There are other treats for you too, such as fresh candies and ice cream. Visit the refreshment center now. Enjoy a delicious snack and ice-cold Coca-Cola.
Music to the ears of the hungry. The sizzle of a mouth-watering hamburger. Fresh, lean beef, done to a golden brown, couched in a soft bun, and garnished to taste. Man, that's hunger heaven. And you'll feel like you're heaven sent when you get one at our refreshment stand.
Okay, we are back, and we've done some soul searching here at TMI, and we've come up with a new process of choosing our co-features. What we're going to do,
this is the old process.
Round robin style. Each of us is going to get a turn at choosing the co-feature. So, Christina, would you like to introduce your pick for co-feature this week?
I certainly would. So we're doing Detective Dee and the Mystery of the Phantom Flame, which is, yes, quite a mouthful. This is a film directed by Sui Hark, who's a legendary Hong Kong cinema producer and director. He directed Jet Li's Once Upon a Time in China series. He produced A Better Tomorrow and The Killer, which both star Chow Yun-fat. It stars Andy Lau, who is also a mega star in Hong Kong. I don't know if you guys are aware of his work, but he has been in a ton of films. Some of my favorites, including Infernal Affairs. He was, by the way, the #1 box office actor in Hong Kong from 1985 to 2005, which is really quite something if you think about it, because Jackie Chan is much more well known in the West, but Andy Lau is a huge star. He's also a singer.
He's a recording artist as well.
Yes, he's a canto pop singer, as it's called. He's super famous. In fact, when during the Beijing Olympics, I remember he came out and sang, can't remember now if it was during the opening ceremonies or the closing ceremonies, but everyone went completely berserk.
Nice.
Yeah, he's a huge star. So if you're not aware of his work, you should go out and look him up. He's really he's a great actor. So this film is based on, it has quite a complicated pedigree, actually. There was an 18th century detective novel. It's called a Gong An novel, which is a specific subgenre of Chinese crime fiction that involves magistrates that solve crimes.
Nice.
And
that's a niche market right there, huh?
It really is. And they usually have like some kind of fantasy or sort of magical sorcery kind of element to them. And there was this book called The Celebrated Cases of Judge Dee, and it was loosely based on the stories of Di Renji, who was a country magistrate and a statesman of the Tang court. Now, the Tang dynasty is he lived in the 7th century, and this book was written in the 18th century. So you can imagine there's a little bit of fictionalization going on here.
Now, did the character that they're basing this on, did he actually solve crimes?
He was
a magistrate.
He was a country magistrate who was sort of famous for solving, mysteries, but probably not in as exciting a way as it was
as they're portrayed.
as they're portrayed. This 18th century novel was written by an anonymous author, and it sort of languished, only known in China until this Dutch diplomat named Robert van Gulik came across the book. He translated it and then later wrote his own stories about Judge Dee. So there's maybe a small collection of stories that are from the original source material, and then a bunch of stories that he himself wrote, which, by the way, the later ones get really lurid. Apparently he had some sadomasochistic tendencies, and that starts showing up in the stories.
Nice. Did they make movies out of those?
No.
Oh, okay.
Basically, what I'm trying to get at here is that Detective Dee as a character is sort of similar to what we were talking about with Mulan. This is a character who has a pedigree, whose story goes back, who's loosely based on historical individual, so the connections between these two films aren't as different as they might seem. In this film, Empress Wu is about to be, well, she's been the regent of China, and she's about to be crowned empress, the first female emperor in Chinese history.
Which is a very important point in this.
Right.
Yes, it is. And by the way, this is true. This is a historical fact. She was the first and only female emperor in Chinese history. There is a construction being made in honor of her coronation called the Towering Buddha. And it's
This thing is mammoth.
This is
Very impressive.
Let me just break in here and just say that this movie, like in the same way that Mulan is just beautiful, I would have to say the same thing about the visuals here.
Yeah,
and
it is
this
absolutely
Buddha
beautiful.
is just like the first bit of evidence that, okay, I'm not in Kansas anymore. This is,
No,
I'm
it's
invested
very
in this
well-
movie after seeing the outside and the massive
inside.
inner workings of this Buddha.
Yeah, it's 66 stories tall. And at the beginning of the film, Jia is showing dignitaries around, foreign dignitaries, to show them the inside of the Buddha. Look at this impressive thing that we've built for our Empress's coronation. And suddenly, maybe about, 5-6 minutes into the
Not
movie,
even, basically.
he catches fire. He seems like he's burning from
It's
the
like
inside
spontaneous
out.
combustion.
Yeah, it's like I was almost expecting that In Search Of theme music to come up.
And then right after this, a couple of inspectors come, Dong Lai and Zhu Yi, and Zhu Yi ends up also spontaneously combusting. And a bunch of the workers decide that this is because he moved some of the banners which are on the inside of the Towering Buddha, and that it caused bad luck.
So
course,
it's they're saying that it's supernatural in origin.
Right. The Empress receives a message from this chaplain who's like her mystical advisor, who tells her to get Detective Dee out of jail, which is where he's been for the last 9 years because he was part of a revolt against her. That only Detective Dee can solve this mystery.
Let's talk about the chaplain.
I was going to say, we're going to
talk
skip
about
over
the
the fact
chaplain.
that the chaplain basically a magic
The
dude.
chaplain is in the form of a stag
Mhm.
that speaks to the Empress to be, to Empress Wu, and instructs her that Detective Dee is the only one that can
And that
solve
is the
this
second
case.
point where you're like, I am really no longer against
Yeah.
because they just all accept it for what it is, which is, oh, here's this giant deer.
You know what's funny, Jeff, is that we covered this, and I don't know, Christina, if you watched this, but the Ultraman animated series, it's on Netflix now, the newest. But we did this in a not so recent episode anymore. But the voiceover of the chaplain in its stag form was very reminiscent of the guy that looked like a giant turd in Ultraman. A very disjointed, very bizarre voice. And there's a reason for that, actually, that you find out a little bit later on in the movie, that he's got such a strange, disjointed voice. All these mystical elements, and then the fact that the two victims of this phantom flame, as it's named in the title, one is an official and one is a supervisor who, as you said, moved one of the amulets. You're trying to think to yourself, how are these connected? Is this just a random supernatural event, or are these characters connected in some way that they would be marked for death?
Yeah, it's such I think it's such a great movie because it has, not only does it have all these sort of fantasy elements kind of working in the background, it has these great martial arts sequences.
There's a lot of nice
choreographed
water work going on.
by Sammo Hung, by the way, another really well-known Hong Kong legend, Hong Kong cinema legend. And there's all these mystery elements, but there's more than one mystery element going on because there's all these sort of political machinations going on in the background, because there's all these elements out there who don't want Empress Wu to become the actual Empress. And then Dee, his relationship with the Empress, I think is so interesting because he speaks to her an amazingly familiar way. He does not speak to her like she's the head of the country. And she tolerates it from him, which I also find interesting.
Right.
She doesn't sort of immediately condemn him. But
Right. Well, it's
when he
kind of like he's divinely chosen by this
Right.
chaplain to
If you
come
got
out
a
of
deer
jail.
telling you go get this guy out of jail, and
Yeah.
this is where I'm like, I want to know more about this character, because we don't meet him until half an hour into the movie, and he was in jail, and you're like, all right, there's much more to this guy's story.
Because he was a dissident, right? That's why he was in jail.
Right.
Right. And so the Empress makes Dee her imperial commissioner, which means that he reports directly to her. He's not part of the Supreme Court, which is where most of the investigators come from. Like, he's actually answering to the Empress. And the Empress has sent her personal right-hand woman, yore to watch over him, because the Empress doesn't trust anybody.
Right.
Let's just say that.
So as far as Dee is concerned, this is his bodyguard, but actually she is spying on him, which of course he is aware.
And then she is my favorite character in this whole thing.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
I do like her a lot.
Yeah, she is more than she seems.
Yeah.
More than she seems.
Well, the three of them. Once the three of them get together with Pei and Dee,
Yeah.
I thought it's a really nice chemistry between the three of them, as a kind of, because she's got her own machinations going on. That she's not, on the up and up. He's just looking to figure out what the hell's going on. And yeah, I really, really like this. I thought it was fun.
And Pei is bizarrely an albino police officer for all intents and purposes, who works for the Empress, and he's a little bit taken aback that Detective Dee has stolen his thunder. Like that he's the only one that can solve this case, and it's like, what about me?
Right, correct.
I'm
I was
just
here
as
at the front. He
capable
was
of
at the front
solving this
line,
case.
right?
So he is very he's very standoffish with Dee, like throughout the beginning of this movie. So he kind of comes off as a jerk, but you understand his motivation a little bit better as the movie progresses.
Yeah. And then, of course, we haven't mentioned, so one of the workers on the Towering Buddha, in fact, supervisor, is Shatuo. And it turns out that Shatuo was an old friend of Detective Dee's, who was part of the rebellion against the Empress. As punishment, he had his hand removed.
Yeah, because there's that big reveal. He takes back his robe, and you just see like a metal implement on where his hand should be. Like, this is what I got from the Empress.
Right.
So you're kind of seeing, as not only is Detective Dee seeing this, but you are as an audience member, like, who has motivation to do this.
Yeah, and I've always been the absolute worst in trying to figure these stupid movies out, like whodunnits. It's like, you all did it. I don't know.
and this is a great whodunit, like I said, because there's a lot of layers. Because there's also a prince who's like getting ready to lead a rebellion against the Empress, and he has soldiers that are ready to like rise up against her on coronation day. There's assassins that are coming after Detective Dee from the get-go, like at the very beginning when you first see Dee in the jail. And this is a beautiful scene, actually. There's flower petals falling like snow. These assassins come in to try to take him out, even before yore has been able to deliver the message that she's come to take Detective Dee away.
Now, do you get the sense that these assassins are coming for him because he is chosen, or this is just a daily thing that happens to him in prison?
Oh, no.
It's assassin time. I better get ready.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I want to know so much more about this character, because there's so much going on when you're first introduced to him, and you're like, this guy's got quite the past.
No, it's because he's been chosen to solve this mystery. So they're trying to eliminate him before he even becomes
there.
And one of the greatest aspects of his character is revealed when he's in prison. He is blind by choice in prison. He doesn't want to look at the world anymore, which I thought was very apropos.
Yeah, and like I said, Andy Lau's a great actor. He's one of my favorites, and I think he's absolutely delightful in this part. I just think he gives it just the right balance of sort of humor and gravitas and everything. I just think he's fantastic. Their investigation brings them to the Phantom Bazaar, because Shatuo suggests to Dee that the reason why these people spontaneously combusted is because of fire beetles.
So now they got to go find what the fire beetles. And where do you get them?
In the Phantom Bazaar.
Because Amazon doesn't carry them, apparently.
And the Phantom Bazaar is basically a buried city. And Dong Lai describes the place as a spooky pandemonium, which I think is a great description of the place. But they basically have to go underground into this sort of, it's a complete society that's like living it, underneath the existing city. And while they're down there, they're searching for this doctor who has information about the fire beetles.
Dr. Wang.
Yeah. Now, are we able to say his name without editing it out in the post?
I'm going to say it. Wang.
Not just Wang, Donkey Wang.
Donkey Wang.
Well, see, I wasn't going to go that far.
So because he has history with these fire beetles that Detective Dee has deduced that is causing these murders. Because they have there's phosphorus poison that these beetles emit that in sunlight causes you to
Combust.
Kaboom.
Right. And while they're down there, they're of course attacked again by assassins. And Dong Lai becomes convinced that the Imperial chaplain is actually behind the assassination attempts and that he's behind the Phantom Flame. But Jing-Er is very convinced that this is not so.
I wonder why. Misinformation. False news.
Yeah. So there's this great scene where there's like various factions sort of fighting the assassins, and Dong Lai is following the assassins because he wants to know, he wants confirmation that it's the Imperial chaplain. Jing-Er is following them because she knows it's not the Imperial chaplain, and she wants to know who it actually is. And Dee is just trying to get the doctor out of there because he wants to know more about the fire beetles. The film just becomes like the strands become, more twisted as the film goes on, where like you sort of get less clarity instead of more.
And this, I could imagine that this really pays off with repetitive viewings, because the first viewing, you are just inundated with all this information.
Yeah, you're right.
And it really winds you through this maze of dead ends and false information. And they kind of backtrack and to get to the actual truth. So with that knowledge of what happens at the end, it must really help with subsequent viewings to kind of realize what's going on in steps.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know how many times I've watched this movie. 24, maybe. A lot. But I still like it every time I watch it. So I can tell you that it is the kind of movie that you would want to watch again.
Yeah, and this is the kind of movie that we can only assume that a lot of our listeners have not seen yet. So this is one of these things that we can champion, that like, wow.
Yeah. And
Christina is very familiar with it because this is her genre. This is what she knows best in terms of film. But a lot of people out there might not. So I would recommend going out and finding this and being very pleasantly surprised. It's on Tubi for free.
Yep. Quick, hurry.
So I don't know if we should give away the ending.
I don't even know if you want to. I know.
I don't know.
I think that's part of the fun, is just the way this unfolds.
But I will say this, that Detective Dee is right in his assumption that it's the fire beetles that have caused this in some way.
But who's
and it's a very nice idea and effect as well, that the poison of these beetles will cause you to combust in sunlight, and the special effect alone of the victims that actually combust is very impressive. And the whole idea of the beetles themselves made me think of this 70s horror movie. I think it came out 75, called Bug, and that was the name of the movie.
Bug.
Which was later they came out with a thriller in the early 2000s. That was also called Bug, but it's unrelated.
That's based on a Tracy Letts play.
But this movie, Bug, was like an earthquake happens, and these prehistoric fire beetles come out of the earth, and they look exactly like the beetles in this movie. And they kind of take over this town. And I remember the TV commercial when I was just a little kid. I remember watching it, and it stuck with me for all these years. This woman picking up a phone call and putting the receiver to her ear and mouth, and there's a bug right on the phone and sets her head on fire as she says hello. Very disturbing movie if you are insect phobic at all. So just wanted to shout out to that movie called Bug from 1975.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think if we're not going to reveal the end of this movie, then we have to stop here, like at the Phantom Bazaar. Because after this is when
that's all hell very
start unfolding, and like the various elements of the plot are slowly revealed to you. But it's
Right.
film is like it's a wuxia film, and it's a comedy, and it's a mystery. It's just got a little bit of everything in it. It's got amazing visuals.
Yes, fight sequences are very impressive as well.
Yeah. Like just some great
this was a lot of
performances.
fun.
And it's really a combination of like a Law and Order type procedural with a historical film. So,
yeah, it's a Sherlock Holmes type of but with X-Files thrown in there for good measure.
And Transfiguration, I might add. So
Yes.
there are a lot of
So come for the giant statue alone.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen Once Upon a Time in China trilogy with
No.
Jet Li.
No.
Yeah, but it's very, like I said, Sui Hark also directed that very similar kind of fantastic. Obviously, Jet Li is a martial arts master, but really sort of fantastic fight sequences, fantasy elements, all the same kind of stuff at work in there. I think if you've not watched a lot of Hong Kong films and the only familiarity you have is with Jackie Chan films, like this is literally a whole world that can be opened up for you. Also, I should mention that this is a series. Andy Lau does not continue after this film. They actually go back in time, so the next two films are prequels, Young Detective Dee, and the series just gets sort of like more fantastic as it goes on.
Well, how do they compare to this movie? Are they as good as this original without Andy Lau?
I don't think they're quite as good, but Mark Chow does a great job playing young Detective Dee. The actor who plays young Sha Tuo, I just forgot his name off the top of my head, but he's also in Swordmaster, if you've ever seen that. You guys see? You guys are like both looking at me blankly.
That's every week. These prequels were directed by George Lucas, by the way, Jim. So they may not be that good.
That's a low blow, Jeff.
Sorry.
Low blow.
Well, Phantom Flame, Phantom Menace. Come on. It's right there for the taking. That's a low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it sounds like a Scooby-Doo when you listen to that. When you hear that title. Detective Dee and the Phantom Flame. It does sound like a Scooby-Doo mystery.
Scooby-Doo!
Yeah, but you guys should go on and try to find the other ones. The next two were in Netflix for a while.
Oh, okay.
Young Detective Dee and the Sea Dragon.
Ooh.
And then the next one after that is Detective Dee and the Four Heavenly Kings, which is like totally bonkers, like really leans into the fantasy elements, like it's really fun. I think this is one of the best series out there that people haven't seen. I've been really excited for them to make another one because I really, really enjoyed this series.
So what was the first time you saw this?
I saw Mystery of the Phantom Flame probably shortly after it came out on video. I'd seen an ad for it, I think, when I went to see another movie, like in the theater, and then I wasn't able to catch like a theatrical release. But whenever I see a preview for anything like this, like I just note it down and
note to self, I'm gonna love this.
And then sort of stalk it until I can see it, So yeah, probably like right after it came out on video,
cool.
Whatever, 6 or 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
Almost a decade old, a decade.
Right.
But this was like an instant favorite of mine.
Right.
So,
and I think it really kudos because it does fit in really nicely with Mulan, back to back, because there is the gender subplot here in Detective Dee with the Empress Wu. So I think it's very fitting that we talk about this with Mulan.
And like I said, also there's historical elements, there's old stories, just like with Mulan. And then, but I just think it's so much fun. So
I think your buckets are going to be pretty high on this.
Oh
movie.
yeah, very high. I know I'm going to give it the highest one of the three of us because I've watched it like a zillion times already. But yeah, this is I'm going to say 4.5.
4.5.
See, I'd go 4. I really enjoyed it. I really liked it.
I would say the same. I would go 4.
There you go.
The element of surprise, I think, always boosts the buckets.
Yes, because you don't really know what you're getting in for.
Yeah.
And part of it's like, oh, what is she getting us in for?
And to be pleasantly surprised by something. Hey, I really like this.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, try it. You may like it. Yes. A lot of fun.
So, if we like it, then you'll probably like it as well. Search it out on Tubi.
Yep. Tubi.
I'm feeling like super vindicated right now because I recommended Summer Wars to you guys and this, and you both liked
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
So
Summer Wars. I almost sat down with my daughter and watched Summer Wars the other day, but we got sidetracked. We're doing
Did you
Bob
sell
Ross
it to
paintings
her? Did you
tonight, by the
already
way.
sell it and she wants to see it now?
Yes, because I'd sent her when
Because I
we
know she doesn't listen to
reviewed
the
it.
show, right?
No, she doesn't. No, not a single family member listens to the show. But she is into anime, and I asked her if she had heard of it, and I said no, and she said no, and then I sent. I might have sent. I don't remember what I sent. I might have been the front or the back of the DVD, or just the. I found the trailer on YouTube, but yes.
All right. So should we go into our confessional?
Let's go.
Confessionals.
So Jeff, do you want to take this one away? As with so many confessionals, this is your brainchild here.
I guess it is my brainchild. I don't know. Again, we're just trying to find something a little bit off kilter, a little bit more fun to talk to. I thought we'd all come to the table and basically confess something new that we've discovered. Maybe not necessarily this week, but maybe since we've been locked down. I haven't,
Yeah.
having a little more time on our hands. So people are going on Tubi. People are going on Netflix. You're
Right.
Searching out on...
Staring at their own navels, I think, in some
yeah,
cases.
basically. Yeah. So, it could be, TV show. It could be a book. It could be a comic. I kind of left it open to interpretation. Just
Kind of when you're in the moment, you're not so reflective. Like, what have I been doing these 2
right.
weeks? So
What have I done with my life?
the days kind of blend together when you're not changing your clothes that much and sitting on the couch with your laptop if you're working from home. So it was a nice kind of reflection. Oh, I am doing something that's new.
So then why don't you go first, Jim?
Okay, I'll go first. I actually got the chance to finish a library book that I've had forever. Now that the library shut down, hopefully they've suspended their late fees.
Oh, you are paying one hell of a fee. That'll be
I finished Full Throttle, which is a short story collection by Joe Hill, whom Christina knows.
I met him at a panel that I was on 3 weeks ago.
You were both on the same
yeah.
panel, right? So I'm sure you were introduced at some point. Which is very good. Anybody that's looking to scratch that Stephen King itch, because Stephen King writes, I love his short stories, be it Night Shift, even Different Seasons, which are novellas. Stephen King knows how to get in and get out, like drop the mic and really fill you with a sense of dread. Like things don't need to have an explanation. They're very nightmarish vignettes, are a lot of Stephen King's straight horror short stories. And Joe Hill has that, but he has very much his own voice at the same time. It's weird. It is like reading a Stephen King story, but it's not. It's got a very modern sensibility, or his stories have very modern sensibilities to them. So I really liked it, and I'm looking now for more stuff from him that I can read. And I'm also reading, and Jeff, I don't know if you know who they are, but Christina will definitely know, the band Suede.
Yes.
Always one of my absolute favorites. They were on the forefront of the Britpop movement coming out of England in the 90s, and they came before like Blur really hit it big, and Oasis and all those bands that you know from the 90s. And they never really got the credit that they deserved. And it's called Coal Black Mornings by Brett Anderson, who is the lead singer of Suede. And he wrote an autobiography that is based on his growing up years, and it stops right when Suede are about to hit it big. So it's really about his childhood, and I was shocked. I do love the band. The book is just so well written, and it's just really more so a reflection of lower class life in Britain in the early to mid 80s, more so than it is a rock biography. And I was so taken aback by that and surprised. And so those are the two books that I'm reading. I'm still in the middle of the Brett Anderson one. But I also really took a shine, more so than I already have, to the show Steven Universe on Cartoon Network.
Okay.
I don't know if any of you have ever seen it.
My kids are a little too old.
A lot of grown-ups watch this show, and it's about this kid named Steven who has a gem in his navel. And he is half human and half gem, and gems are kind of like super beings that come from another planet, and they often fight various monsters every week. But the show itself is so inclusive of all sexual orientations, of all minorities. Every race seems to be represented in this show, and it is such an inclusive show. I am very glad that my son is watching it now and has this kind of exposure to these ideas. And I don't know if it works on any kind of a conscious level in his brain, but I'm hoping that it builds
the fact that
itself
he's being exposed
subconsciously
to
in
it,
him
right?
that this is in the world and it's okay.
And you said it was on Cartoon Network?
It's on Cartoon Network, and it just ended. So there's been a lot of hype around the finale of the show, which just aired, I think, this past Friday. We've been binging it because they've been rerunning all the episodes to lead up to the finale, and I really took notice of it this past week. And I'm really happy that he's watching it now that I've watched it.
Awesome. Christina?
So I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about Beastars, which is this manga that I've been completely obsessed with for the past several months. This is a story about carnivores and herbivores trying to live together in a peaceful society. And the story takes place at Cherryton Academy, which is a high school. The main character is Legoshi, who's a gray wolf, who is sort of very quiet, very retiring, and he spends a lot of time kind of repressing his instincts. And he starts to have feelings for a rabbit named Haru, but he's not sure what those feelings are. Does he want to eat her, or is he in love with her? He's not sure. And there's a lot of themes that are explored in this, and I think that in a lot of ways, the sort of repression of instincts and the changes you go through are very, very much allegories for being an adolescent and the different changes that you go through. There's a murder mystery in the story, although that's kind of been sidelined for a little bit, but right at the beginning, an herbivore in the school is killed by a carnivore and nobody knows who did it. The term beastar refers to a student who can unite the herbivores and the carnivores. It's sort of like a Zootopia, but much more mature.
Like a lot more mature, right?
Yeah, like a lot more mature. Yeah.
I can't believe that you're bringing this up because I just listened to a podcast, and I'll be damned if I can remember the name of it, but they were going on about this book, and I didn't catch the name of the series. Mm-hmm. But the minute you brought up the wolf and the rabbit, this is exactly the same thing. So you are not alone. Apparently, this is a very well-loved.
It's fantastic, and it was
made me want to go find it.
It was made into an anime, and it's only a 12-episode series, but it was just released on Netflix. So you can guess what I was doing last week, which was watching the show. And the anime covers like roughly the first 5 books of the manga. So the first of the collections.
And did they stay within the very serious adult tone?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Okay. So it's really worth checking out. Like, there's a lot more going on to it than initially seems. And I do think you just kind of get caught up in the relationships between the characters. And there's some really beautiful animation in the anime. Especially the opening sequence is stop motion.
Oh, wow.
And it's really well done. I feel like it comes as no surprise to anybody that I chose Japanese.
But that's what this is. That's cool. That's great. Awesome. Bringing choices to the masses. All right. So I don't stray too far from my lane, really, at the end of the day. I just finished watching Picard on CBS All Access. I know, by and large, that we were not going to be talking Star Trek. We don't normally talk Star Trek. I've dismissed it as a kid growing up, but the Next Generation came around right around the time I was in college, and I didn't realize how closely I was affected by those characters. And they've come up with a handful of movies over the years or whatnot, but Picard, for anybody who doesn't know, is Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, and he's executive produced this. And it's on CBS All Access, which is unfortunate because anybody who really wants to see this show is going to have to pay to see it. But it is 10 episodes. They just wrapped up season 1, and it is phenomenal. I teared up numerous times in the last 2 episodes alone. So if you're a Star Trek fan, if you've not checked it out, definitely check that out. But I started watching with the missus, where it was suggested by a friend. Merlin, you familiar with the TV show Merlin? I guess it ran for a couple years, 2008 to 12. It is now on Netflix, and we're probably about a dozen episodes in or whatnot. And it's kind of a CW take on the Arthurian legend. Merlin's young kid, but his introduction to Arthur and Guinevere and all the main characters, and it's really well done. We're enjoying the hell out of it. So,
where are you watching this?
Netflix. Yeah.
I think I have seen a couple of episodes.
Yeah, I think it's actually called The Adventures of Merlin. I didn't realize that it came out, 10, 12 years ago, but
Right.
it's, like it's kind of a teen angst, but you got John Hurt as the talking dragon. Like, this guy will just do work for anything. We just talked about him, 2 episodes ago in Black Cauldron. He did the voice of the
Horned King.
The Horned King, yes. So there you go. Those are my 2 picks for something different.
You know what? Speaking of the Black Cauldron, we didn't really get into this, but we couldn't have Christina as part of that discussion because she was touring Australia at the time. So,
Yes.
but you've revealed that this is one of your favorite Disney movies, and I meant to ask you about this last week, and I forgot.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite Disney movies, and it was one of my favorite book series when I was a kid. So my mom always took us to every Disney movie. Like, I have seen every Disney movie in the theaters because, especially when I was young, this was before videotape. They used to do re-releases of films.
Yes,
in
the
you
theater.
could go and see the older films in the theater. Every time that happened, my mom would take us. So I actually saw The Black Cauldron in the movie theater, and I still have my copies of the Prydain Chronicles by Lloyd Alexander that I read when I was a kid. And actually, a few years ago, my son was interested in them, and I didn't want him to mess up my old copy, so I bought him his own set, and it's one of his favorite.
Touch my books.
And it's one of his favorites too. Yeah, I love The Black Cauldron. The film is not really at all like the books, but I still enjoyed it. It's actually, many elements are actually more from the Book of Three, which is the first novel in the series, but they leave out obviously huge chunks of the story. But I was one of those kids who just loved fantasy, anything that had to do with fantasy. So anything that came out that had fantasy elements, I sort of latched on to it.
So
I
would
was
you give
disappointed
buckets right now to the Black Cauldron, or are you not prepared to do so?
I would give Black Cauldron 3. Yeah.
That's where we stood on it, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Because I like the books better. But I remember really enjoying the film when I was a kid. So, and yes, I do own it, and I've watched it since then.
Interesting.
So there you have it.
So yeah, go back and listen to that episode if you haven't heard it yet.
Okay, so next week, we are trying to get as close to the theater as we can. But thanks to Universal, they have put out some recent theatrical releases out on streaming services. So we're still able to cover some recent movies for you. And we're going to start with The Hunt next week. Now, this has always been on our wish list.
Yes.
All the way back to August of 2019 when we saw the previews for this. And I am so glad that this is coming up on my turn to pick a co-feature. Because even when I saw that preview back in August 2019, I was like, this would go perfect with such and such.
And what is that such and such?
So let's have the drum roll, please. And so I have decided, even because we've discussed this director a few times in the past few weeks, that it might be well timed to cover one of his movies. Although it's not the movie you might expect. I'm talking about John Woo, who has made some classic actioners, but I'm choosing, because the story seems to me to be very similar to what's going on in The Hunt, I'm choosing his first U.S. production, which is Hard Target, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme in the lead. Now I can see Christina shaking her head. This is part of the reason why I wanted to drop this on this episode, so I could not be talked out.
She heard woo and she was in.
Yep.
And you were this close. This close.
Now let me point out who else
Just
stars.
amazes me that in John Woo's whole collection of amazing movies, this is the one that
This
you
is the
picked.
one, baby. This is the one.
No wonder you didn't want to tell me.
Yep. So, but let me point out that it also stars Lance Henriksen, Andrew Vosloo, who we know as the Mummy from the Brendan Fraser.
Yeah.
Arnold Vosloo.
Arnold Vosloo,
Yeah.
and Wilford Brimley
Oh, Wilford's making a
as
comeback.
Jean-Claude's Cajun uncle. So,
Cajun uncle. Great.
now let me just point out that I saw this theatrically back in 1993. A couple of friends and I went to see it. We were already familiar with John Woo, and we also loved Van Damme movies. And I had one of the funnest times in a movie theater watching this. I laughed at it and with it simultaneously. And it just brings me joy to see it, so much so that I've bought it and I own it on DVD. Now, think of it this way. If you're getting through this movie, and I'm speaking to my two partners here and anybody that's listening, that there's a lot of slow-mo shots, as in all John Woo movies. You're going to see some doves. You're going to see some slow-mo. And in this particular movie, there's a lot of slow-mo kicks to the face. So when this is coming, and they're telegraphed pretty well.
We turn this into a drinking game?
No, I'm going to turn this into like a catharsis for all of us watching.
Okay.
That you can picture these characters that are getting kicked may have just said something like in your imagination, America will reopen for business April 14th.
I thought maybe it would just be like, we're watching Hard Target.
Well, here's another one. If the states are nice to us, then we'll help them.
Here we go.
So
how can we see this,
Jim's
Jim?
trying so hard to make me feel better about this movie.
It is on Hulu. It is on Stars, and it is on iTunes for like $2.99 or something. So in lieu of anything else, you can see it on iTunes. And it's on YouTube as well.
YouTube, yeah, I see YouTube.
Phenomenal fee.
Do I own this movie, Jeff? Is that what you're trying to
Yeah, it's a part of your Woo collection.
Is this in a box set somewhere?
No, this didn't make the cut.
I mean, he's going John Woo, and I'm like, is it going to be The Killer? Is it going to be Hard Boiled? Like,
No.
I went hard boiled as well. Hard Target. No.
But this plot is about hunting humans, which is the basis of the hunt. So
okay. I was trying my best to figure out what Jim was going to parrot, and the only thing I could think of was Deliverance. Apparently that was not it.
I'll be honest with you. I thought maybe you do, the Most Dangerous Game, which is the...
Well, that's, the grandfather of all
right.
these. I thought that might have been a little too obvious and a little less fun for me than Hard Target.
Oh, too much fun.
But there you have it.
All right, there you go. There's another week down the tube.
Down the tube.
That was fun.
Yes. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Hang in there. Stay safe.
Stay safe. Join us next week. I hope you're washing your hands.
There you go. Always do. I'll watch this microphone.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIConfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you. Yes!
What?